If you know real, then you also know when it's not real. And I didn't want anyone to ever think it wasn't real.
John Madden kept insisting that there had to be 11 on 11 or it's not a football game. But the reality was the technology just wasn't quite there yet. So
Mike Micah has been developing and writing about video games for nearly 3 decades.
It's just completely impossible. There is no way.
He says that in 1984, at the time of this meeting, you just couldn't make what Tripp and John wanted.
So early computers had very simple processors. They were basically text machines. They were never really meant to display a lot of graphics. It was almost like if you were drawing things by hand. And so it was really easy to make a game like Donkey Kong because there's very little going on. But when you look at something like football, where the entire screen is moving and changing and animating, it was almost impossible.
Admittedly, those machines were always going to get replaced by better machines, so this was not going to be a long-term constraint. But the reality is we then proceeded to bite off a really challenging technology development problem.
Trusting they would be able to solve the technical problems, Tripp and John focused, for the moment, on football.
And we'd stay up all night, drawing plays. And we'd draw plays, on big paper and then put the paper on the windows. Blocking the 2 inside linebackers. We'd be going through Utah, Nebraska, and Wyoming, and Illinois, and all that stuff, making up plays for a game.
The meeting on the train was really just the start of a process. We were together for a couple of days. I got all the questions answered that I had at that time. And John was living in Oakland, so occasionally we'd go over to Oakland, or he would come down to the office. So there were regular opportunities to kind of revisit and clarify things. And it was in the contract that John was going to provide a playbook. And I wanted about 130 plays. And I was figuring he was going to, basically draw out 130 plays and hand me what I wanted. And instead, he gave me a 1980 Oakland Raiders playbook in a great big fat 3-ring binder and said, you can use this to create whatever plays you want.
And they came back and basically said, well, we want to put your football values and football plays and the way you design your game plan into the game. The problem was, from a computer memory standpoint, they could not put 22 players on a screen.
John was pretty upset because he felt like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be the market already, and I'm just trying to get the thing done no matter what it takes. This development problem that was supposed to take a year took 4 years. Toward the end of the 4-year period, the auditors for the outside accounting firm came to me. They say that the John Madden football project had become known in the last few years as Tripp's Folly. And that, hey, you've paid out $100,000 in advances against royalties to John Madden. I go, yeah, that's right. He said, well, we just wanted to let you know that we've discussed it with the finance department here, and everybody agrees that this game's never going to get finished, and that there's no chance that those royalties will ever be recouped. We're telling the company to write the whole thing off like you're never going to recover a penny of it.
That is the sound of John Madden Football, finally published in 1988. But you could only play it on your computer.
And it was on the Apple II, and I remember it was one of the ugliest looking football games I'd probably ever seen, but it was displaying 11 players on each team, which was phenomenal. And these players were, I think they were like 8 pixels tall. So imagine that, like only 8 dots that your screen's capable of drawing. That's how tall each player was.
When you were dealing with these early machines that had very little graphics power, the game had to be more cerebral. We then, the next year, came out with a version for the IBM PC. But the big breakthrough was the next year, because I had kind of pivoted the company to start making games for video game consoles. And I decided to target the Sega Genesis. And I bet the farm on it.
That was the beginning of the franchise for most people, because that's the version that everybody thinks of when they think of Madden football.
The Sega Genesis cost $179, so everybody could afford it. It came with 2 joysticks, and it had a graphics chip and a sound chip. So you had way better graphics, and then we were able to basically build an even better game.
Not only did they make a better game, but they knew how to sell it.
Tripp's interesting because he's that triple threat. Maybe you should call him triple threat Hawkins or something, because he understood marketing, he understood the technology, and he understood the consumer. He knew exactly what all 3 needed to have. And that's where I think Electronic Arts, they knew that John Madden was a secret weapon, not only for the consultation, but also as a name that they could attribute to the game that makes it legitimate. That was their secret sauce.
John was all over it. He was in every part of it. You get the product, and the cover has him breaking through a chalkboard.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to John Madden Football.
And you turn on the game, and his face comes up. And then he was basically the announcer.
Hey, he'll remember that number.
And when you're calling your plays, if you weren't sure what to do, you could ask him for his advice. Later on, every generation of technology allowed the graphics and sound to be steadily towards a more immersive experience.
Madden was improving every year, but Tripp found himself pulled in a different direction. And in 1994, he left Electronic Arts to try to create a new gaming platform. That same year, David Hill was hired to be president of Fox Sports, which had just acquired the rights to broadcast NFL games.
The combination of Pat Summerall and John Madden, for us at Fox, was a must-get.
And when we first went there, I remember they had a sign. They made up a deal that said Fox Sports. And I looked and I said, they had to take the S off that. This should be Fox Sport. Because the only sport we had at Fox was NFL football.
He was very kind to me because, for God's sake, an Australian out of London producing American football, I don't think so. And I said, look, we are providing a cure for boredom.
And to better cure viewers' boredom, David Hill proposed to turn John's vision for Madden on its head.
One of my goals was to make the video game look like television. And then David Hill said, we want to make the game on television look like the video game. And I thought, man, we did it. We came full circle.
I've always loved video games. Most of my concepts about the way sport should be produced, I've stolen from video games. That I'll never forget, my son was then 12. And I would just, like as a dad, just play with him and watch. And I started realizing that I was more engrossed, I was more emotionally involved to a video game that someone had created than to what I was doing 6 days a week, which was producing live sport with top athletes. And so I started looking critically at the game to determine what had the game maker put into the elements that made it so compulsive. And so I merely copied that and used it on television.
You can actually see and hear the changes soon after Hill got to Fox. For instance, listen to this 1993 version of the Madden video game.
28! Hut! That one didn't have a chance.
Even though the audio is really primitive, you still hear the quarterback and sounds from the field. Now, listen to a CBS broadcast from that same year, 1993. The teams are lined up at the line of scrimmage here, but you wouldn't know it just listening. The quarterback and line that you heard in Madden are nowhere to be found in the CBS broadcast.
Close-up audio is far more effective and impactful than close-up video. So I surrounded the field with guys with Sennheiser gun mics to get the sound of the line and all that stuff.
Just a year later, the Fox broadcast, under the guidance of David Hill, sounds a lot more like Madden.
Mike Shanahan's probably saying right now, well, enough for that run. Let's go back to the pass. Here's Young back to throw it. And he has a man, Rice, wide open in the end zone.
As David Hill was implementing video game tricks on TV, Madden was sounding more and more like a TV broadcast itself. And as a game that was published every year, Mike Micah says Madden always had to innovate.
Madden would adopt any of the newest technologies that were coming around because you have to have a lot on the table every year for somebody to buy the game again and again. And so they just started adding all kinds of things, 3D, all the camera control stuff you had and all the audio. You started to hear games being announced like you're watching television.
If you take too many of those, it's going to shorten your day.
It was amazing.
EA was recording thousands of lines with John every year in these long recording sessions.
This is what football is all about.
Perfect.
Donnie Moore has been part of Madden's production staff for the better part of 2 decades. He says John's demand for authenticity constantly challenged the game's writers.
The audio guys would write the scripts, and then they would sort of be in the recording studio with John as he recorded it, right?
Are you ready?
So
We're ready, John.
he was not a fan of some of the lines that we had for him.
Then the other team might have, oh, no, you never do that. That's a never. Whoever wrote that, tell them, that thought never enters a mind ever. These are really some really stupid things.
I'll let other writers know.
Anthony White, another longtime member of Madden's production staff, recalls that John accepted nothing less than a professional's understanding of the game.
There was an incident where one of the recording sessions, one of our producers mentioned, well, when I was a linebacker, we did it this way. And Coach Madden said, well, you must have been a pretty shitty linebacker.
We got to a point where, we had to get some really football savvy, people that had played the game and maybe even, coached a little bit or whatever to sort of help us with our writing.
You have a few timeouts to use. There's few timeouts. You only have 3 timeouts, so they have 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
So if I didn't want to say how many, I would just say they have timeouts rather than a few.
That works for me.
It was feel like they got like 8 or something.
That'll fit just fine. That was great.
John's attention to detail extended to his game as well.
Madden took it to the next level because of the realness of it.
Even players were impressed. Emmitt Smith is the NFL's all-time leading rusher.
Oh, without a doubt, I thought it was cool that I was in a video game. And when it came down to Madden, it was real cool.
By 2001, a whole generation of young players was hooked on the game.
Spent my whole college time playing video games.
Like Buccaneers receiver Jaquez Green.
When do you play? Do you play on your off days? You play at night?
Play every day. Every day I play. Whenever I go home, I play. Play all weekends. I play before I go to the stadium on game days. That's my whole dream. I want to make it to the NFL just to play in this right here. More than I want to play in the NFL.
That year, Jaquez won a Celebrity Madden Bowl tournament and collected a giant trophy from John Madden.
Jaquez, congratulations.
It's telling to see John handing that trophy to a player in 2001 because the game was becoming more player-centric. That year, for the first time, John Madden was not on the game's cover. Instead, it was a player, Eddie George. And for the first time in years, other games, like 2K and Game Day, were challenging Madden's dominance.
I remember hearing stories about certain players would not license their likenesses for Madden, but they were going to license for 2K.
As a game developer, Mike Micah was on the front lines as the battle between Madden and its competitors heated up.
It became this fractured thing. I remember it being a huge fight for attention because you have all these people licensing the NFL and then trying to get their attention and time to help promote their games. And so it became like a bloodthirsty war at that point. In 2004, 2K is trending really well. It looks and plays basically better than Madden. I remember working on a proposal to bring the latest version of 2K to Game Boy Advance, I think it was. And then news broke that Electronic Arts, with all this pressure from every company around them, locked in the NFL as an exclusive license. It was like a nuclear bomb going off in the game industry. I knew things were bad because our call that we're supposed to have got canceled immediately.